Welcome to Talking Meds on the PrescQIPP podcast, engaging conversations about medicines-related dilemmas. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Talking Meds. I'm Jonathan Underhill, and I'm joined today by Helen Kilminster. Helen is a senior pharmacist and advanced clinical practitioner at Portway Family Practice in Sandwell in the West Midlands. She's also the PCN Deputy Clinical Director for an organisation called Citrus Health, which covers over 43,000 patients across 6 practices. She's also Vice President for the Primary Care Pharmacy Association and a Royal Pharmaceutical Society Fellow. Helen, I've known for a number of years through some of our work we did working on national committees for NHS England and others. You're also, Helen, a member of the NHSEI Inclusive Pharmacy Practice Advisory Board. We talked about inclusive practice with Hadil Mohammed on this podcast a few weeks ago, which was great. I know that part of your work that you're really passionate about, and you're a mentor for the Enigma program as well, aren't you? That we talked about with Hadil. So welcome, Helen. Lovely to see you. Could you start just by telling us a little bit about your career journey so far and what's brought you to where you are today?
Thank you. That's a really warm introduction. Took me by surprise, really. I didn't realise there was so much to talk about. So where did I start? So I was a boot Saturday girl with no real ambition to do pharmacy at all. And I just rocked up at my local boots at 15, just wanting a job. And I was told by the pharmacist who was the store manager there that actually I was too young to get a job. I had to be 16. I said, I'm going to be 16 in 2 weeks. And he's like, come back and see me in 2 weeks then. And that's how it started. And I had an interview and he said, you're rightly placed to be a healthcare assistant. And then UCAS and, school life, just navigating that. At the pharmacist I was working with was, what are you going to do as a career? And I was just like, you know what, I have no idea. But I'm doing all the sciences and doing maths because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And the pharmacist said, actually, why don't you just do pharmacy? I think you're a really good fit for it. You'll love it. You'll really enjoy it. I went to Portsmouth. So again, no sense of direction. I just went with it, applied for pharmacy, applied to Portsmouth as well. Again, didn't think anything of it. And then 2 weeks before A-level results were due to come out, I got an unconditional offer for Portsmouth. And my journey through pharmacy has been, I would say, quite squiggly. I don't think I had any real ambition to get to where I am today. It has always been an organic process of this feels right, or actually I don't feel I'm doing the best I can be, or I'm not around people that I can be the best version of myself. So done hospital, I did community, worked in a midnight pharmacy, and then found that I was pregnant and couldn't juggle 100 hours pharmacy with children, and decided that general practice might be a solution for me. So a friend of mine had started working in GP Federation. This was over 10 years ago now, and said, actually, Helen, you're coming out of maternity leave. How about you show general practice what a pharmacist can do? Just go in 4 hours a week. Just show them what you can do. I don't know what it is that you can do, but just go and see what the skills are of a pharmacist in general practice. They've never had a pharmacist before, so, put your tin hat on. And that's how it started. And then 4 hours became, can you stay for a whole day? Can you stay for 2 days? Can you do 3 days a week? And then this was just before the NHSEI pilot for pharmacist general practice. And at the time, South Worcestershire won the largest pilot bid for one pharmacist per practice. So that was 32 pharmacists going into general practice in one locality. So we took that opportunity to see who else was available within our network, and we built that. And that, like I said, that was before anything that I knew now, without any much of a guidance, but it just felt right. And here I am, working in general practice, 10 plus years now.
Very good. I loved your description of your career journey as being squiggly. It's a fantastic word, squiggly, isn't it? And I think it's almost onomatopoeic in terms of how it describes what you just said to us. And I think there are lots of pharmacists who have a sort of a squiggly career journey. So you can have a plan and you can think, well, yeah, and it's great to have a plan, but you've also got to be open to different opportunities as they come about, because sometimes you can't predict what's going to happen. Sometimes you have a plan and you think, well, if I get this job and I get this qualification, then this will happen. And then you don't get that job. And it's how then, what does that then mean? Because another opportunity might come up the week after. And it's just about being ready for those opportunities and actually saying yes to stuff. That's what I'm getting from you. It's like that sort of attitude where you just, well, yeah, it's not quite exactly how I planned it, but I'm going to give this a go. And I'm going to try general practice and see what happens and look at how good it's been for you.
Yeah, I have to say I've been really lucky, even with hospital. When I started out in hospital, it was obviously you had all the NHS agenda for change, so you had clear banding, you had clear expectations of where you're going to go. But we did things a little bit left field, around chemotherapy at home was just starting out. And then I was doing oncology, and they said, oh, why don't you go to the outpatients and see what you can do at the outpatients? And again, really basic things like just talking to patients about antiemetics, about pain relief. They obviously oncology have extensive specialists, but sometimes they just want someone to talk to. They want to see a familiar face. I'm going to the oncology centre every week with the chemo, with the radio that we make in the pharmacy department, but they get to see a friendly face and they can ask questions. And that's when I thought, actually, you know what? Being a pharmacist is pretty good. You can get an insight into someone else's life for just a few minutes, and you've made a ton of difference by just asking the right questions or just listening.
Yeah, well, I think we'll maybe come back to that later on. I suspect that's sort of the essence of generalism and how good pharmacists are at that. I think, as you say, seeing that familiar face, that continuity of care can be really important. So just in terms of what's on your agenda at the moment, then, what's not quite what's keeping you awake at night, but what is it that's sort of like, on your desk that you're having to deal with at the moment?
Well, on my desk currently at the moment are NHS contracts and local contracts. So I'm just navigating that. We're facing a huge change politically, as well as what does NHS England movements look like in the next few months. So having to navigate that and also settle some uncertainty, like you say, general practice can be that. Sometimes it's an interpretation of the contracts to understand how do we utilize the best skills that we have in the team. But financially, this is the rub in terms of how do we make it viable? How do we keep the services that we provide to our population sustainable? And how do we actually tackle health inequality in the bit that we can control? There's loads of stuff around health inequality, unfortunately, that's outside of our gift to give. But we have to do something. Doing nothing is not a choice. We have to do something. So the way that I look at contracts is what are the practical things that I can do and I can deliver that's not going to burn out the team, or where are the gaps in our knowledge that we need to develop, and that let's plan that in for the year and let's see whether we can make some health improvements. So I'm looking at doing some heart failure work, so I'm hoping that improves our prevalence, again tackle health inequalities, but also work closely with secondary care, so that we can provide a really comprehensive service to patients that have high mortality. So lots of those sort of things are on my agenda at the moment. It does keep me up at night because there's a lot of discussion nationally around the ARRS roles in PCNs, and we have board meeting tomorrow. I do expect to have some challenges around the spend and how the ARRS team will function in this new landscape with the new roles that have been launched this year, and how we will spend the money that we're allocated. So it does feel quite vulnerable at the moment for all the roles. My job really is to demonstrate their value and to showcase that to the board, because I don't think anyone is irreplaceable. However, I've got to evidence that all the additional roles are adding value to patient care. And if they're not seen to be adding value, then how can I make that happen? Because I don't really want to lose any members of the team because they've worked so hard over the last few years. And they have a breadth of experience now than they, if we were to recruit tomorrow, the same candidates might not have that level of experience. So I don't want to lose that experience in the room, but I understand the challenges that I'm faced with. So that's probably what is keeping me up at night. But I relish in challenge.
So that clinical director role, the deputy clinical director role, must be quite an interesting one. How many pharmacists are there who have those roles across England? Do you know, Helen?
I don't know off the top of my head, but when PCN's first rolled out, I think Graham was the first one. And then there was myself, and there was a handful. So at the very start, there was about 5.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at here is you're not alone, are you? And you have a good network of other clinical directors who you would talk to about those, because I suspect they're going through exactly the same dilemmas and challenges that you're going through. So how well established are your networks, and how do you go about accessing that wisdom?
So that's an interesting comment because when PCNs first rolled out, they rolled us all into a room. So at the time, across Sandwell and West Birmingham, I think if I remember correctly, there was about 15 PCNs. So quite a lot. And all the CDs came into the room to go, right, how are we going to tackle? How are you going to provide us, the CCG at the time? How are you going to provide us reassurance that you're going to deliver this movement? And obviously, the PCN CD role was completely new, and the network service specification just kind of put some loosely terms around roles and responsibilities. But it's up to interpretation of how you see that role happening. And then you have the likes of PCNs that have come together through natural super partnerships of GP practices. So they're naturally already a group of practices. So for them, a clinical director is pretty much what they're doing day to day. Whereas if we go by the definition, what NHS England expected PCNs to be as a group of GPs coming together and working together collaboratively, and then someone just to lead that, that was quite bold. So no one had any prior experience. So when we came together, and then obviously COVID hit, that was a real test of, like you say, networking. Can I borrow your notes? How have you delivered the amber site? How have you delivered the red site? How have you protected your workforce? How did you recruit? So all of these questions absolutely were part of that network. So there was a local group, and then NHS Confederation also set up a more national group, which I was part of. Again, myself and Graham Stretch were part of that NHS Confederation as the only 2 pharmacists in that committee. But again, there was 2 things that were clear for me. Was one, that we approached it in a different way compared to GPs and maybe nurses that also took on the role as the CD, and our priorities were slightly different. So as much as we understood the service contract and what was asked of us, our approach was very different, but the outcomes, I'm hoping, were the same. However, again, there were some GPs that took the role and took their interpretation in a completely different direction, and really lost sight of the true sense of collaborations around a primary care network, i.e. looking outwards to other organisations. Whereas I think as a pharmacist, we do rely on other people to do our job well. So it was always in my landscape to look outwards to try and bring everyone with me on this journey of trying to find a way to get the network to function for the population. So yeah, I think the biggest test for me is gaining trust from other colleagues that didn't feel familiar with a pharmacist in a clinical director's role, or dare I say it, being female. I was very much often the only female in a room. And it has challenges, but then I'd like to think that I had some really good advocates that kind of gave me the space to voice my points of view and my opinions, which I still feel quite honoured to have that space, really. But it is quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's that sense of feeling isolated and on your own, and of course you're not. And I guess that's So your role within the PCPA as well, so the Primary Care Pharmacists Association, obviously you're vice president of that. I guess you get a lot of support from them and Graham, who I think is president of the PCPA, isn't he? Just tell us a little bit about PCPA and how what that does and how it can help pharmacy professionals, I guess.
Yeah, so with PCPA, I was a member first, and I rocked up to one of the symposiums in the West Midlands, just fresh into general practice, thinking, oh, I just want to understand this role better. I wonder what's out there. And I'm so glad I went, because actually there was a whole load of things that were being showcased that I think, oh my goodness, I've got an idea that I want to take away. I want to do that tomorrow. I want to improve patient care by doing this. And I just felt like I was a better version of myself for attending. And then networking is just phenomenal. Just the networks into NHS England. I didn't think I'd get to meet all these national directors, and just the involvement around listening to members, because like I said, I was a member at the start. And I remember Graham approaching me at Clinical Pharmacy Congress the one year, and he said, "Have you ever thought about being on the committee?" And I'm just like, "Well, no, not really." He goes, "Oh, you'd be great for it. You lead by example. You practice what you preach. So why don't you'd be a really good champion for the organisation." And then that's how it started. I became a committee member, became quite vocal around things that I was passionate about. I do feel myself as quite a social injustice fighter, where I want to make sure that the pharmacists have a seat at the table and the right people are there for the right reasons, and not as a token, but to add value to the discussions that are being made, whether they're local or national. So I do feel like I am a bit of a disruptor, and maybe that's what they saw in me. And yes, so myself and Graham have, everyone sometimes think that we work together, and I think that's testament to how we are seen publicly in terms of our close, supportive relationship. We are very much like a Bonnie and Clyde. We just face into challenges together, and we do challenge each other, which is, again, I love that. I love that Graham will ask me questions and try to understand my point of view. Sometimes we have a contrast in viewpoints around how we would approach different things or interpret whatever documentation's been landed nationally, or if there's any movements in what we're seeing in the pharmacy profession. So around the RPS vote, for example, around indemnity, all the big topical discussion points that we're seeing playing out in social media. Myself and Graham are always trying to find a way to be supportive, to not just to our members, but obviously we run a Telegram group as well, and that's open to non-members. There's thousands of people in there, and that's probably where I see my value in that.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's a number of things. It's that network that you've got, so like-minded people who are also doing a similar job of work, and there's an organisation there that can support you, and there will be someone who's probably thinking the same thing you're thinking, or is having the same challenges that you have, and you've got that group that you can access. There's also the events that you guys put on as well, which are really quite helpful, sort of webinars and things like that. And I think the relationship with organisations like PrescQIPP is quite interesting as well. So PrescQIPP will do complementary materials and webinars and educational sessions, and PCPA will often partner with PrescQIPP on that. It's interesting that you describe yourself as a sort of a Bonnie and Clyde partnership. I do hope the outcome's a little bit better than it was for Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, me too.
um, I mean, we've talked about this already, haven't we? A little bit. We've touched on the kind of the generalism and specialism, and obviously there's a big move within the profession to try and encourage pharmacists to specialise. Whether you go down the consultancy path, the consultant pathway at RPS or whatever. What are your feelings on that in terms of specialism and generalism?
I see value in both, and I think they're vital actually to have both, and pharmacists in particular. the knowledge of medicines is broad as we go through undergrad, and then obviously with the new foundation training that's been proposed and will be enforced, we are looking at a foundation generalist that will hopefully will have the right exposure to lots of different things, lots of clinical expertise, and lots of different prescribing activities. So I'm hoping that the future pharmacy will actually recognise, one, there is value in being a generalist and it's a choice that you make, or actually this is what I'm really, really passionate about and I love this and I'd love to be able to know to the nth degree around this specialist area, because this is what makes me happy. And actually when I delve in deeper and understand some more of the clinical nuances around specialism, it's what actually excites me. And I don't really want pharmacists to lose that passion. Whereas for me, being a generalist, I love learning and I'm very much content with the fact that I don't know everything. I'm happy in this environment where I don't know everything. But you know what? I would do my absolute best. I'll give it 110% every single clinic day that I have, because I just come into work with an open mind and I'm ready for anything. I am okay with uncertainty. I understand that there is a level of uncertainty that I work in, but again, I'm at peace with the fact that I know what I can do. And even though appointments are time limited, I can't do everything in one appointment. So it might need another appointment, or it might need further investigations, or I might need to ask my specialist colleagues for some advice and guidance. However it looks, I still make my contact with that patient count. So I've met specialists and I've got friends that are specialists, and I just feel very fortunate to have that network where I'm not surrounded in an echo chamber. I'm surrounded by colleagues that all want each other to do well and push each other to do well. So I've got some fantastic heart failure specialist pharmacists that I lean on to help support the work that I do, because I still see myself as a mere mortal generalist. And it just propels me to do better. And I just think actually this is where I've got a bird's eye view of this patient and all their long-term conditions, and I have access to all these specialities. But for what the patient needs right now is somebody to put it all together for them and to provide them with a quality of life that they can manage day to day. And that's my job.
I mean, I heard a really good quote describing generalism, and it was something along the lines of, as a generalist, you see the same patient throughout their life, but their conditions change. And you have to be familiar with the person. And if you've got that continuity of care, which is such an important thing, and one of the things that the NHS really needs to address, is how do we still get that continuity of care rather than seeing different people every time within general practice, which I think loses some of the value of general practice if you're not seeing the same person who knows you throughout your career. And obviously specialists see the same condition day after day after day, but with different patients. So it is different there. So a specialist will fix that particular issue with that patient, and then the patient will then be looked after in general practice or by a generalist. And I think that's a really, really good way of thinking about it. The other thing and I think a lot of generalists this is part of your makeup in some ways. It's like, I'm just a generalist, you said there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm always minded by David Haslam, who's one of my heroes. He used to, general practitioner, he used to be the chair of NICE. Wrote a fantastic book called Side Effects, which we'll put in the show notes to give David a bit of a plug on that. And he was the chair of the BMA, okay, and was at a European meeting with all of the other heads of the different doctor organisations across Europe. And he was approached by this German cardiologist who said, "Oh, David, what's your specialism then?" And David said, "Well, I'm a generalist. I'm a general practitioner." And the German says, "No, but what's your specialism?" And he went, "No, my specialism is that I'm a generalist." And it was almost that sort of the status that's applied to someone who's a specialist generalist is less than it is if you're a specialist cardiologist or diabetologist or whatever. And I don't think that's right. I think the value on having a good generalist is just as important as someone who can, perform brain surgery or cardiac surgery. And it's something that I think we should celebrate within the pharmacy profession as well. Because as you say, Helen, if you're a specialist heart failure pharmacist and somebody comes to you with a rash or they've got a bit of eczema, because of your generalist foundation as a pharmacist, you can give an informed clinical opinion about what the best ways or the best options are for managing that rash or whatever. As pharmacists, we do have that broad general educational background that enables us to have a valid and useful clinical opinion on something that's perhaps outside of our specialism. And I think we need to remember that.
Totally. I think the conflict I think we have in the NHS at the moment from a patient's perspective, if when you have a look at the media, they talk about continuity care and having a regular family doctor and a GP, but at the same breath, they're giving patients a lot of options to access healthcare. So you've got pharmacy first, you've got 111, you've got an urgent walk-in. If you can't get to your GP, you can go to out of hours. You might have a GP out of hours service based within your local hospital. So actually, we're now giving patients choice. So actually, patients may not think about continuity care in the moment. So it's a bit of a conflict in terms of the message that we're giving to patients, I have to say. And patients just want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be reassured. But sometimes in the moment, you forget around that continuity care. I want to see the same person all the time, but actually I can't access them. So actually, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go here. So I'm reading a really good book as well called Range. And the subtitle is How Generalists Triumph in a Specialised World. And again, it's quite interesting in terms of it's not trying to sell one is better than the other, but just to open up the mindsets around the beauty of having both types of people, those that specialize and those that are generalists and excel in their generalism. And also the fact that actually, if you don't specialize in something, you don't find that something that you're really passionate about, are you that sort of person that actually is a good generalist? And actually, but you didn't see it in yourself before, and you didn't see how that generalism is an actual skill, that you can turn your hand to anything. You're versatile, you're flexible, you're adaptable, and you can move with the times. So being specialist sometimes puts you so far down one route that actually you can't bend and flex. Being a generalist, and that's what I've learned through working in general practice, is no matter what comes my way, I know I can make good of it, because maybe it's a fault of my own of being an eternal optimist, but I always think, as it might feel like a bin fire at the moment, there's always good to be found.
Yeah. My great friend Jamie Hayes talks about some times that when he spent in general practice where he was interviewing the GPs, and he was saying what they were saying to him was, I don't know what's coming through the door next. So I have to be ready for it, and I have to use my consultation skills to find out what matters to that person very quickly. And I think that's something that often gets forgotten when people are going to different providers of healthcare. As you say, choice is a great thing and really important, but also is the continuity. How do you get both? And I actually think there's something about having a patient held record that just says, these are the things that really matter to me. These are the things that are really important to me. And that's the first thing that you see as a healthcare professional whenever you see that person. You either ask them or you've got their record and you say, oh, right, I know a little bit about this person because it tells me here what's important to them and what matters to them. I think that would change a lot of the way that we approach healthcare, actually, Helen. So, so just in terms of being a generalist, then, what would you say were the, just to finish this off, what would be the three things you would say to pharmacy professionals to ensure that they can stay up to date as a generalist? or perhaps within their own specialist field as well. But let's stick with generalism for a minute.
Yeah, I think this can be applied to both. So the first thing is around the people that you're around. So find your tribe and find your network. So it doesn't have to be pharmacists, it can be pharmacy technicians, it can be GPs, nurses, whoever. But just find the people that inspire you, that give you a spark back, and you're able to be open and share that network with. So I think that's the first step, is surround you with the people that give you energy. The second thing is to subscribe to newsletters and join other organisations. You may not see the benefit of them, but you know it's an interest that fields your career or your working sector. So PrescQIPP, for example, were amazing when I first started out in general practice. They provided lots of guides that I could easily download, and one of the key things that I used was I don't know whether they're still called that now. They were called prescription management coordinators or something like that. And it was around about upskilling people that weren't pharmacists or pharmacy technicians, but you wanted them to do really well in managing prescriptions and understanding medicines at a really basic level. But it just provided some reassurance that we were doing a good quality service. So PrescQIPP and people like Open Prescribing, they provide you the information. You get monthly newsletters. And then if you want to specialise into something, obviously you've got primary care, Respiratory Society, and there's one for diabetes. If you want to specialise in heart failure, obviously there's a British Society for heart failure. But I would say, given the fact that I've joined as a member just to pique my interest, a lot of the work and the content, I would say, is probably more for secondary care than it is for primary. So, but again, it's for me to understand the flip side of things. And again, it just challenges what I can do in primary care. And the third thing really is to test your knowledge. You take in all of this information, but you've got to have an outlet where you can actually assess your one, applying it, and two, it's actually being applied to practice. So whether it's a peer discussion, whether it's a case-based discussion that you have, whether it's a local thing, or doing a poster, for example, just getting your work out there, test your knowledge, put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, because knowledge is great, but if you don't share it, it always feels for nothing.
No, I love that, Helen. So get a good network, stay up to date as efficiently as possible. So the principles of information mastery are at play here, and PrescQIPP are doing some face-to-face information mastery courses for how do you go about staying up to date in an efficient way. And I think the thing about testing your knowledge is really important as well. So it gives, first of all, it gives you a sense of where you are and how much you know and how much maybe you don't know. And doing things like a poster presentation at a conference, that really can gets you up to date in a way. Or doing a teaching session, because you have to be up to date, because you don't want to look silly at a teaching session when you don't know your stuff. I guess the other thing here is, well, and obviously we're going to have a Royal College of Pharmacy soon. There are massive implications here for the Royal College, aren't there, to take a lead on this sort of thing. They could do worse than just apply those three principles as the way forward for the Royal College as well. I think I'm really excited about the Royal College. I think it could be great.
Yeah, no, I welcome what the debates have been like, because I think it forces the organisation to really do something I feel quite radical and different. But unless all the voices are around the room, we can't really move forward. So I understand the grievances that have been out in social media around the vote, but I feel that the change is not really for me now, given the time it's going to take and set up. But I'd like to think that we, the royal we, lead the profession in a far better way and a more stronger position than how we entered it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great note on which to leave this. It's been fantastic to speak to you, Helen. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening, guys. And we will see you next time for the next Talking Meds. Bye.
Thank you.